it is.
Okay, I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting of Tuesday, August 11th, 2020 to order. And I'd like to recognize that we're on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Today, we're going to read Article 15 from the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples have the right to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information. States shall take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination, and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Indigenous peoples and all other segments of the society. Okay, so we're on to B, in-camera meeting recommendation. Thank you. And we'll move in camera pursuant to 91A and 91K, which you can see on the screen. And is there anyone opposed to moving in camera right after the open portion? Seeing and hearing none, that carries. And we're on to C, adoption of minutes. And the first minutes are from the Regional District Board meeting, July 28th. Thank you. Any discussion about the minutes? And is there anyone opposed to minutes adoption? Seeing and hearing none, we are on to delegations. And we have CERMAC Canada, Brock Thompson, Amy Johnson, and Linda Sands from CERMAC Canada, and they should be joining us on Zoom today.
Hi there, this is Amy Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'll start my video here. Linda Sands was unable to join us today. I'm Amy Johnson. I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for CERMAC Canada, and with me is Brock Thompson, our Innovation Director. I will just, oh, there's my screen right there. I can share it as well from my side. What's easier for you?
Yes, it's easier for us. Thank you.
If I share, okay. Let me just share.
No, we're going to do it for you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so I'll talk to the first slide here, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague Brock. So sorry, one more in. There we go. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are. We operate here on Vancouver Island. We have 26 farm licenses on both east and west coast of Vancouver Island. We have 4 freshwater hatcheries. Most relevant and closest to the Comox Valley Regional District is our Stelling Road hatchery, which is just south of the Comox Valley. We have a processing plant in Tofino as well as an office, and here in Campbell River we have an office as well as we license with Browns Bay for our processing. Depending on our harvest schedule, we have between 250 and 300 employees. And we, our latest numbers are from 2018, but we spend about $625 million locally on contractors, suppliers, and service. We also, the years have ranged a little bit, but on average, we spend about $200,000 to $250,000 on community investment and sponsorship. And we farm about 22,000 metric tons of fish annually. And with that, I'll hand it over to Brock.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone. My name is Brock Thompson. I'm the Innovation Director with CERMAC Canada, and I've got, I want to thank you all for the pleasure of kind of going through and talking to you a little bit about our closed cage system, our semi-closed cage system that we are in the process of implementing or putting into place in our Tofino region. So if we want to go to the next slide. So ultimately, what is a semi-closed system? Well, it's very much like a typical circular cage site, and what you see in front of you now is our semi-closed cage in our Horsvagen site in northern Norway. What we plan on putting into our sites in the Tofino region is very much the same as what this looks like, but quite a bit, or quite a few versions newer than this. So if we want to go to the next slide. So what is a semi-closed cage? Well, overall, there's a few kind of main components that make it a little bit different than your traditional cage. The floater, or the floating collar, is made out of 120 meters of large diameter steel pipe. It's 1.2 meters in diameter, in fact. So it's a fairly heavy duty floating structure in comparison to what a traditional cage would be. From there, there is a 15,000 cubic meter high density poly bag that consists, that's the semi-closed portion of it. And then there's also a traditional farming net installed inside that bag. In order to keep the water flow in the bag, we require 4 large riser pipes and pumps to maintain the water flow inside the cage. The water in the bag is actually higher than the water in the surrounding ocean, and that's what gives it the structural stability in the form that it's in, and that's what makes it, or keeps it from deflecting in the tide and the waves and the weather. So it's not, it's a little bit like a balloon. Powering all of that, we've got 3. Moving stuff around a little bit. Can we go to slide 5 real quick? Yeah, nope, up one. Yeah, there we go, sorry. Powering all that is 4 35 kilowatt pumps, and that's what keeps the water going through. So to put it into perspective, the water transfer rate, so the retention rate in the bag is about 50 minutes. So we have to pump in 300 cubic meters of water every minute in order to get that turnover rate. So there's a large quantity of water going in and out of this. It's a bit like a hatchery at the end of the day. So because of that, we have to monitor all the water quality on the inside. So we're looking at monitoring O2, pH, salinity, turbidity, the water level, as I mentioned, to make sure that we keep the right positive pressure on the bag. And then we've also got cameras topside and underwater to observe the behavior of the fish inside. In order to support all of that infrastructure, the pumps and the sensors and all the electronic equipment, we need to have a support barge along with this that has all the electrical generators to run the pumps. It also has a control room with all the PLCs and everything driving the system. But it also has O2 generators. And because we're managing this much like a hatchery, a floating hatchery setting, we need to supplement the oxygen in here. And in that control room, as well as all the alarms and bells and whistles that the farm staff need to monitor and keep looking at on the regular basis and adjusting as they operate the bag. So if we want to go to the next one, next slide, please. So I guess the question is, why are we embarking on this little adventure? Well, there's quite a few different drivers to us pursuing this, but a lot of it is because of its customized footprint. It can be adapted to our sites, both in physical and biophysical characteristics, such as kind of where we're pulling the water from. So there's a lot of work that went into deciding some of the critical aspects of the design, and the riser pipes and the pump speeds and all that kind of stuff are things that are critical design features on this that are very much customized to the site that we've outlined putting this in. In terms of its comparison to regular production, it gives us greater control. Water quality is one of the items that is challenging for our farmers. So by controlling that seawater intake, we can actually eliminate the potential for some of the things that cause us production problems, which is harmful algae, sea lice, which would in normal settings get introduced into the system. It's semi-closed, so we don't have the potential for negative interaction between wild and farm populations due to that big solid thick bag. It also essentially eliminates the potential for predation from seals and sea lions as well. And ultimately speaking, it's adaptable. So, we don't need to go out and seek new sites. We can actually put these in our existing marine licenses. So the ability to transform our existing production at some locations, it's easy to do without having to go through the rigor of the new license process. And what we've seen in Norway is it does improve fish performance. So, we've gone through a couple iterations of fish entries into our installation in Norway and have had good success. That being said, there's still a lot of things that need to be done. We see the potential benefit that we've experienced through our Norwegian trials, but we're in BC, we're not in Norway. So there are other things that we have to manage, and that's that piece around harmful algae, sea lice, wild salmon populations, and the potential for pathogens. So these are all things that we're going to be learning about through the first group of fish through the semi-closed cage. Dissolved oxygen, believe it or not, is a very much a real problem in BC waters, more so than other parts of the world, and it's something that our farmers here have had to change and adapt to, even in the open net pen production. And we will have to really learn about, what we need to supplement in order to make sure that we meet the changing oxygen demand as the fish grow inside the closed cage. And essentially the overall investment cost is dramatically higher for one of these cages in comparison to traditional net pens. So we have to be able to deliver on some of these benefits in order to make this a financially viable and feasible endeavor. So I want to move to the next slide, please. So what do we know and what have we experienced? Well, our installation in Norway is a little bit smaller than what we've proposed for here in BC and what we're going to actually deliver upon. It's actually only 2/3 the size at 10,000 cubic meters. We chose 15,000 because it's a better fit for our production strategies. And, they've had to tailor their, pumping parameters and all that, the design of their intake pipes to their needs rather than ours. But we've done 2 cycles of fish, so 2 entries of fish through this technology in Norway, and got very similar results in both. First cycle, we saw about 14% higher growth compared to the control cages, and the control cages are the regular cages you see in and around the closed cage. We saw no sea lice in either year. And overall, we saw very good welfare and actually even lower mortality when compared to the control groups because of that ability to control the environment within the closed cage. And those biological indicators were also replicated in the second season. So, gave us a lot of confidence to pursue this for here in British Columbia. So we want to go to the next slide, please. So where are we doing this? As I mentioned, this is something that's underway. We started construction at a site of Canadian Maritime Engineering in Port Alberni. We're using their Canal Beach site. And the assembly stage started in mid-June, and it's actually slated to finish this week. Sorry, my dog's losing her mind because somebody's at my door. I apologize for that. And the nice thing about doing this in Port Alberni is we're actually using local contractors, local service providers that will help us support this technology introduction, not only in the assembly process, but down the road on the repair and maintenance end of things. So it's even though it's a delivery from a Norwegian supplier, there's quite a bit of local support on this. So if we look at the timelines, we started planning on this. Like I mentioned, there's been a lot of work gone into some of the design characteristics. We started the planning in early 2017 when we put the first fish in our Norwegian operation. And it's, kind of that planning's trickled right through into 2020. We signed the agreement for the purchase early 2020, and now we're in the assembly process. And we plan on completing that stage and moving into a transport to our sea site late this month, early next month, and getting ready for fish in November. The fish will then be in the closed cage for 14 to 21 months, depending on the production cycle. And we'll have a pretty good idea on where we sit with this later on in 2021. So if we want to go to the last slide, or second to last slide, I suppose. This is kind of some of the assembly that's happening in Port Alberni. So you see to the left, we've got crane operators and fabricators and welders putting the sections together. The sections were actually prefabbed overseas and shipped, just because trying to translate drawings into actual infrastructure was something that we need to learn about. So we're taking notes as we're building these, with the hopes of potentially building them locally in the future. On the right, you can see an aerial photo of the size of the infrastructure. So we've got cranes and other equipment inside there. So just to kind of give you a bit of a scale on the size of this piece of equipment. And then at the bottom, you can see one of the fabricators standing beside the actual socket that riser pipe sits in, and it's a pretty sizable piece of equipment. So it's a lot of welding, a lot of painting, sandblasting, all happening here in locally in British Columbia. And I think that takes us to the conclusion. So thank you for the opportunity for the quick presentation on our little project.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Are you open for questions?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. Do any board members have questions? Director Hamir.
Oh, that's better. Great. Thank you for the presentation. I had a couple of sort of technical questions first. You mentioned with this new semi-contained system, how much water you were pumping in, but you didn't describe what happens to the water coming out. I'm assuming it has to come out sometime. So what happens to that water? Are you filtering that water before it returns to the ocean? What happens to all that water with the waste products in it?
So, this is why it's still considered a semi-closed system. Around the perimeter of the bag, there are actually ports that allow some of the water to go out, and that water, those ports are strategically designed to allow for the proper hydrodynamics in the bag. The solids, though, because of that hydrodynamic modeling, do filter down to the bottom and are collected in a sludge collector. The biggest problem that we have is, globally speaking, nobody's figured out the technology to collect and extract or separate the solids from the water, and then also disinfect the water that's coming out of there. So, we felt it very important to go in, even though it's not a perfect solution at this point, to go in so we can learn about it, so we can actually participate in the development of some of these items that might be kind of more local priorities rather than global priorities for the development of this particular technology. So there's still work to be done on that end of things.
Okay, thank you. Sort of more on sort of the technical side, or not the regulatory side. My understanding was that the Ministry of Agriculture was starting to rescind some of these licenses. How does this system fit in that whole overall infrastructure with the ministry?
Amy, did you want to tackle that, or do you want me to give that a whirl?
You know what, I'm not up on that topic. So if you
Okay.
want to give it a whirl, Brock, or I
Sure.
can also commit to following up and getting back with information.
Okay, so yeah, I'll do a crack. So, essentially, we've got kind of two mandates that we've got to keep an eye on, and one of them has been from the provincial government with regards to our tenures. So it's our obligation as producers to have agreements with local First Nations for all of our tenures in place prior to 2022 for the renew of any tenures. So if we fail to do that, those tenures don't get renewed, which then negates the potential for us kind of continuing to do business in BC. So there's a lot of work being done in that arena. The second one, and this is kind of one that has been maybe there's some confusion on, and that's this concept and some of the announcements made during the election around the 2025 deadline for the transition from open net pens. And that one is a responsible plan to be developed by 2025. And that was announced by Minister Jordan following the federal election. So, we're working towards making sure that we're looking at what that transition plan may look like as a part of 2025. And, it's kind of our duty to make sure that we're looking at different technologies, both land-based and semi-closed cage, as well as hybrid systems, to kind of make sure that, we're part of the conversation when it comes to this potential transition plan in or by 2025.
Okay, sorry, and if I just have one last follow-up, because you mentioned that your tenure or your licenses require First Nations approval. So have you got that for this facility that's going into Port Alberni?
Yeah, well, we're working on currently working on renewing our protocol agreement with the Hausik First Nation. So of course, as a part of our commitment to UNDRIP, we approached Hausik prior to even embarking on this little adventure, making sure that we had their permission to investigate this in their traditional territory. So they've been very much a part of all this, and as a part of our ongoing conversations for that protocol renewal, is very much this looking at alternative technologies to improve traditional net farming.
Okay, thank you.
Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have 2 or 3 questions here. I guess the first one is probably the simplest. How many of these semi-contained pens are operating in Norway? Was that on one of the slides?
No, and I can only speak to what we have. We've got one, and it's still very much in a trial phase. And we've partnered with one particular supplier, and then there's quite a few different kind of ongoing projects in this arena in Norway. So when we looked at this globally as a group, we kind of engaged with 2 or 3 suppliers and felt that this particular supplier had probably the most advanced delivery.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just thinking about sort of, it's a study of one in Norway, and then this would be another one. And how many pens do you have altogether? This would be one of how many?
Well, that's yeah, it would be one. So we operate off and on anywhere. We've got 26 net pen licenses in British Columbia. And those range from anywhere between 6 to 12 cages of varying different sizes. So it'd be one of those, but
right,
due to the ability to manage the water quality within one of these cages, it has the potential of dramatically transforming what we do today.
right. And I guess sort of following up on what Director Hamir talked about with the waste that's going into the water, there still essentially is basically salmon sewage going into the water, and it's my understanding that actually contributes to the algae blooms. So I'm just wondering how you would be, I guess, mitigating that with still such a substantial amount of sewage going into the ocean.
Well, that's the discharge from the farm sites are actually one of the things that there are clear regulations around with regards to the measurable impact of a farming operation. So part of this work and gaining approval from DFO, we did have to actually submit a renewed and revised deposition module, which kind of outlines that area of impact from the discharge of a farm site. So part of what we will do as a first go with this technology is DFO's asked us to maintain kind of traditional stocking densities within the cage to understand not only the welfare the fish inside the cage in comparison to traditional net pens. But we'll also look at validating the deposition module, as I mentioned, which is a mathematical model that we use for calculating the impact based on the tidal characteristics, the depth, the bottom profile, and all that. So, those are all things that we can measure and we are benchmarked against. And it is one of the things that can provide a stopgap in our continuing production at a particular farm site if we exceed those regulatory thresholds.
And I maybe just wanted to jump in and add that. So when it comes to our farms, one of the reasons why Atlantic salmon are so fantastic for farming is that they are very efficient feed converters. So for it's about 1.2 kilograms of feed is required to grow the fish by about 1 kilogram. So there's very little waste, and of that waste, about 15% is solid. So when we're talking about sewer and sewage, I can send information following this call, but we've got the math of comparing what a salmon farm would look like in terms of a conventional terrestrial farm, sort of a cow farm, and it's number of cattle head per acre comparison to our farm to sort of give a picture of what that looks like. The other nuance is it's actually when we're talking about salmon waste, it's actually sterile, so it doesn't contain pathogens, it doesn't contribute to the sort of like it's not like human sewage going into the bay. It's much different.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question around the containment itself. So normally with net pens, you get a lot of fouling because a lot of stuff grows on the nets in the ocean environment. I'm wondering what is that like with this sort of tarp-like structure that you have? Do you still need sort of anti-fouling maintenance?
Yeah, so again, anything that you put in the ocean seems to be a potential for attracting fouling organisms, and this is no different. There's no anti-foulant properties in the equipment itself, so there'll be a maintenance requirement for the outside of the bag, no different than any of our other structures. But because we're pulling water from so deep, and I don't think I mentioned it, but we're pulling water from anywhere between 22 and 27 meters in this particular installation. And that is, generally speaking, below where you would see most of the larval stages of fouling organisms. So by doing that, we're going to reduce the fouling pressure on the inside of the bag, which in turn, kind of reduces the pressure on having to keep it clean on the inside.
All right. Well, I'm happy to see that you're making some headway with new technology and trying to meet the 2025 deadline. Obviously, there's still some tweaking that needs to happen, but it's good to see that there's some progress as well.
No, and like I mentioned, it's thanks for that, and I think it's important that we're kind of at the forefront of investigating these in BC rather than waiting for solutions to land on our laps. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken in this particular project.
Oh, and I see we have one more question, Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks so much for the presentation. I just wanted to follow up on putting two things together. I understood, Brock, you were saying that there's a capture system at the bottom for waste from the salmon. And Amy, I thought you said, and I may have misheard you, that only 15% of the waste produced by salmon is solid? Correct. So doesn't that mean 85% of it is liquid? In which case, I guess I'm not sure how the gravity-based capture system at the bottom, how that would assist with the 85% of the waste that is liquid. And I'm wondering if that liquid waste would then end up flowing out.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's essentially kind of the semi-closed portion of it. And, again, those are there for the hydrodynamics, which there's advancements on. And as well, like I said, the capture of the waste and the management of that. So, we adapt the technology that exists for wastewater management to this, not only in volume, but characteristics of the waste.
May I ask a follow-up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, given that it seems that 85% of the waste is liquid and liquid is flowing out, do you anticipate any advancements on filtering or treatment of the water that flows out of this system?
Yeah, again, I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not the leads on some of these advancements. So what generally we would like to see in terms of wastewater management for this would be a collection of all the water. You would separate the solid from the from the liquid, and then use UV to disinfect or treat the liquid portion, much like you would see in a normal wastewater treatment plant. Just because of the sheer volume, the fact that we're dealing with salt water, the waste contains a lot of salt. It will be highly turbid. These are the things that we need to kind of get on top of and seek solutions, not only locally but globally as well. So there are conversations now, a bit of a closed cage support group, if you will, with CERMAC and other producers that are looking at this technology to talk about topics just like this.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
And you're not off the hook just yet. We have another director, Hillian, would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. I have to confess that I've just finished reading a book on the history of the forest industry in BC, and it left me somewhat staggered about how long it took us to realize that the resource wasn't in fact infinite, and at some point we were going to have to change our practices if we wanted to continue to have the resource at all. I'm not sure how many parallels there are with our fisheries, but I do have to confess that when I go to the supermarket, I buy wild salmon, and I think a lot of consumers are in that position. So I'm just wondering, I really appreciate the work that you're doing to improve the technology and to cooperate with the First Nations and the government, because I know how important this industry is to local employment. I'm just wondering though what your sales are like, and whether you feel the efforts that are being made are helping to counter the public image of farmed salmon among consumers such as myself.
So just to kind of back up a little bit, we sell 30% of our product that we produce is sold domestically. 60% goes south of the border into the U.S. and the other 10% to the Asian market. So we kind of diversified our receiving market in that arena. Even through a lot of the recent challenges in the food production industry with regards to restaurants shutting down due to kind of pandemic related issues, we've still continued to see a constant demand for our product in the markets that we supply. The pricing is obviously softened, but once we move away from the west coast of Canada, who have got a large connection, both culturally and spiritually, I should say, to the wild salmon, the demand for our product is fairly constant and seems to be growing. So we do have a lot of work to do to improve that public trust and social license in order to change the opinion of some of the people in the local communities. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of work being done on that. But in the big picture, there has been an increase in demand for our product.
And I can sort of add to that a little bit. So we are big supporters of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we're also one of the first signatories to the United Nations Action Platform on Sustainable Ocean Business. So we know that as the population continues to grow, we're going to see increased demand for healthy, sustainable protein. We're going to see increased demand for natural resources like land-based, fresh water, fossil fuels, all of those things. So moving forward, Also, we know that commercial fisheries are, a lot of them are at sort of their maximum that they can continue to sustainably support. So we know that there's going to be a continuing to grow population. There's going to be a continuing demand for sustainable and healthy protein. And farmed salmon has actually the lowest carbon footprint of any farmed protein. So we really, there's an opportunity there for us to help that need while helping to fight climate change and helping to continue to feed the planet.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that information.
All right, I don't see any further questions. So thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And is there anyone opposed to receipt of that information? Seeing none, that's carried, and we're on to item 2, which is a delegation from Mayor Bob Wells in regards to the Economic Recovery Task Force Steering Committee.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks everybody for allowing me to speak today. Just wanted to give a brief update on where the Economic Recovery Task Force is at. We've been meeting for, I think, the last couple of months. We've had one meeting where we've met with, I think, most of the TAC members. I think we had about 50 or 60 people on the Zoom meeting, just kind of giving them brief overview and welcoming them and thanking them for their time. And now we're getting to the point where we're getting actual information back. So, and I'm not too sure, let me just change my screen here. So you guys should have received a document that has a bunch of information on it, and maybe I'll get to that momentarily. But the letter that's on the screen that I see before me, I guess one of the things that would probably be good to mention right now, that we do have these various TAC sectors that are meeting, and each one has a facilitator, and they are the ones that are responsible for submitting the completed reports, and they're working with Comox Valley Economic Development to do so. And so what we thought would be appropriate is to thank those facilitators. Again, everybody's volunteering their time, but these facilitators are actually herding the cats, as it were, to try to get these documents finished so that we have some information. So we've requested a $2,500 budget so that what we can do is take that and actually purchase gift cards within the community from our the Comox Valley business community, and then provide those to each of the facilitators. So of course, that'll probably be something that somebody will have to do as a motion somewhere along the line. But I think that would be something that would go a long way to thank people for the work that they've done. And generally speaking, I'm fine if people want to interrupt me with a question. So if that's the feeling, go right ahead. But if we continue down, I think, and move into the actual business case action plan process update, we got the minutes as well, but they basically just kind of say who was there or who wasn't there. I think that one of the things that we're looking to do is articulate exactly how we're going to be doing some of the work. From my perspective, the terms of reference pretty much put us in, you know, if there's things that we can do locally, how we do that, and then if there's things that we need to advocate for through the province or the federal government, then obviously that's something we can do as well. I know Director Acting Mayor Ken Grant has also been interested if people are asking for money, is there a budget for that? But that's something that I think I'll leave that up to the CVRD to, if they see that that's within a delegated authority they want for us. But I don't think at this point we have a lot of push for that. I think really what we're focused on is getting these reports completed. And so looking up here, we can see, if we look at the first one, Innovation Island Association that Graham facilitated, we can see that that action plan is actually completed. And so they are looking for some investment and some funding, and there's some policy that they'd be looking for as well. So the first 2 pages of this document really is that really quick snapshot. So you can sort of look, see who's completed, who's in draft form, who's in progress. I believe that this is last updated July 30th. And so, you know, in the last week or so, there's probably even more that are completed, and then some that maybe are in progress might be in the draft mode. So what we thought is, you know, right now we're, I think, at about the halfway mark. I think there's 13 that are completed. And so we thought this would be sort of a more manageable amount for the board to kind of look at and see if there's anything that you guys like, don't like, if there's anything that you think we might be able to change and kind of iterate and make better. So, these aren't numbered, unfortunately, but basically the first 2 pages is that quick snapshot. And then if we move on to the 3rd page, that's when we can kind of actually get into, and of course, the pages I have aren't necessarily lining up. Oh, that's your last page. You don't have the other pages. So maybe you guys didn't get that.
Yeah, I think what happened was we had sent this document and when it was presented to us at the task force, it had the links to the individual proposals, but that wasn't present on this agenda. So I think we need to resend that to each of the directors so that they have the ability to see the individual proposals.
All right, and I do know that that did come out, because that's how I got it from the email that Aaron had sent, I thought, to Jake, but I could be mistaken. So I, unfortunately, as soon as I'm done with an email, I do archive it. So it's going to take me a little bit to find it, but I'll forward that right now, just so that, is Jake the right person to forward it to, do you think?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I'll send that right now. And then we'll go back and we'll get back to Innovation Island at the top there. And I'll just kind of read off some of the things that they've said sort of at the local recommendations. And I guess it's for the regional district board members to know that when CVEDS is working with each of these sectors, basically what they're saying, tell us what is going to be required both from a local government perspective, regional government perspective, and then from a provincial government perspective, and then a federal government perspective. And then that helps articulate for us what are potential policies that we can do, what are ones that we're going to have to advocate for, and then if there's things that maybe multiple sectors are going to benefit from, we can focus on that better. So. Basically, if we look at Innovation Island, they were talking about greater emphasis should be placed on digital technology adoption. And then, you know, where we actually see that happening already is through ICE-T, the Island Coastal Economic Trust, where they're actually already providing grants and funding and working with businesses. And I think that's one of the easier low-hanging fruit is through CVEDS or even say the Cumberland Economic Development or Comox First Nation Economic Development, or through the base. All the members of the sort of task force are able to get that information out to the people if it already exists, so they know they can actually adapt to those and get some grant funding. And then basically regional solutions and then seeing what can be done for tax breaks, zoning, rent assistance. And so, you know, that's just a quick snapshot. You don't have it, so it'd be a little more difficult for me to go through too much of this, but the pages of the summary, basically the summary of the summary, basically just kind of tries to play into it. So maybe if there's any questions that people have on.
Mayor Wells, how do you feel about trying to share your screen so that we can see what you're speaking to?
I'm fine with it. I believe I may need to be bumped up to like a co-host or something, but let's see if I can just share my screen. And where'd that? Come on, you can do it. Yeah, so as soon as the host gives me permission, I can do that.
Yeah, it looks like we only have the option to make you a host.
A co-host will get her done. Oh, it's just a little ticky box.
Just host is what the option what we're looking at on our screen. Right, because it's a webinar. All right, well, I think we might have to wait for that information then.
Okay. All right.
The other thing I was going to ask you is, our procedure is when we have a delegation, if there's a request, that request is not considered until the following meeting. Do you feel that that's appropriate for the request, or would you like us to take a vote to change that tonight? Or do you feel that the 2,500 isn't that urgent?
Well, the two things I would say is in terms of urgency, my only concern would be timeline and not knowing how frequently you guys meet. Really, it'd be nice if we were able to do something sooner rather than later, but I don't see $2,500 is particularly onerous. So from that perspective and the speed, it'd be great if it would be considered today, but it's certainly not a hill that I'm willing to die on today either. So I will leave it up to the will of the board.
Okay, so when we're finished this conversation, I will put it to the board as a vote as to whether we consider your request this evening.
Awesome, I really appreciate that.
Okay, there are some questions. Director Hamir?
Thanks, and thank you, Mayor Wells, for your presentation. I know a lot of work has really gone into this to get all of these reports together and to get that table together. My question kind of is around philosophically how we're going to do all of this. I'm wondering if the leadership committee has put its mind to what priorities you're going to give. Like there's over, I'm understanding 50 different sectors that are going to be putting in plans. And what rises to the top, and how are you going to, and I'm assuming it's you who are making the decision, not particularly the regional district. So have you put your mind to what criteria you're going to use to move certain sectors? What's been the talk at the table?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and I think it's possibly more complicated than you might think, because there are, we have seabeds that's kind of helping from a resource perspective, helping us move through this process. But Cumberland has their own economic development. Comox First Nation has their own economic development, and even from the basis perspective, they're in their own sort of bubble as well through their chain of command. And when we look at what can be done from the task force, I think really, to me, the big thing is making sure that we have the information to make the decisions. But I think it's also pretty clear, and probably one of the things that I'll be recommending is that we actually invite Cumberland Economic Development and KFN Economic Development to the meetings. I've already had conversations with both Hagus, Chief Rempel, as well as Mayor Baird about that. And so both seem interested, so that their economic development staff can be more integral into this conversation. So it's not necessarily getting filtered. And so again, the first thing I think is the data, and then really looking to see how do these requests fit into what we can do. And again, what we can do as a municipality may be completely different than the base can do, or Comox First Nation. So, and so it's really about trying to make sure that there is some alignment, and then if there's ways that we can work together, that we're doing that. If we're going to advocate and go again to the higher levels of government, that's possible. As I mentioned, Director Grant has spoken about being able to give out financial grants or something along those lines to help out businesses. But that becomes a little bit more tricky. And when we think, the discussion at the task force so far is that if we go down that road, which I don't think there's, it's not necessarily where we're at right now, prepared wise, but that we would look to something like ICE kind of model to go, okay, if we're going to do something like that, that's how we're going to do it. But if it's a policy decision, what we're going to be doing, just not unlike the agendas that you get at the regional district, is on the summary pages, it'll actually say this is something that maybe is a regional district thing, maybe it's the city of Courtenay, and so it'll be a little more articulated out. So if it's something that, say, only the city of Courtenay is going to have control over, then it'll say this one is really for the city of Courtenay. But everyone who's part of the task force is actually going to be able to see it, just in case, even though it might not be particularly for them, they'll still be able to use that information potentially to inform decisions. So, so I know that's a long answer, but I think, first and foremost, it's looking to see, are there things that we can do? And I think to that end, there's things that many of the local governments have already done. And so things are happening already. And if we talk about parklets and really advocating towards the province on fast tracking, allowing pubs to open up out onto patios, et cetera. So that work, I think, has been ongoing probably since even before maybe the task force. But when we look at those decisions, it's really going to be something that we all get the same information, but each local government, Comox First Nation and the base will be able to actually sit down and make those decisions the way that they see best fits them.
Okay, thank you. I know these decisions are not going to be easy, and so much is going into figuring out, how and where we can move these sectors forward. If I could just sort of advocate for, if we all can go back to March and April when the COVID crisis just began unfolding, I think many of us were thinking when we come out of this and we start recovery, it would be really lovely to not go back to business as usual, that we take this opportunity to rethink how we can come together as a community and really highlight the assets that we have, the natural assets, our water, our soil, our forests, our trees, and our people, and go forward based on those natural assets, which I think aligns quite well with many of the strategic drivers that the regional district has around climate change, around First Nations, our relationships, and community, all of the relationships we have with community organizations, the health of our arts sector, for example. So yeah, I'm just going to make a plug for that, for when this group does start to make those decisions, if we can keep that in mind. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, and I can't help echo those thoughts. And in a previous life, I know I did work to help get eco assets onto the books especially with our water at the regional district, and doing similar things here at the city. Our OCP that we're doing at the city, which is somewhat unrelated, but still talking to some of the same groups, is actually taking that climate change lens on everything. And so I certainly see the opportunity, and and so as best we can, we're gonna use that lens. But as you can imagine, for some businesses, they have been impacted quite severely, and so their frame of mind sometimes is not necessarily as open. But for other businesses, this has actually been a big boon for them, and so I think that there is certainly a lot of opportunities, and so yes, I thank you not just for your comments today, but for a lot of the work you've been doing, Dr. Mayor.
Okay, Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we did talk about releasing because of all the reports that have come in so far, we have a little over 10 that are already more or less completed. And if you look at the comments, there's some commonality running through those. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult to actually zero in on stuff that local government can do, because of course you have to realize a lot of it's bluster, a lot of it's the pent up frustration that business have, and many of the issues would require more advocating senior government for this, that, and the other thing. But there are some stuff in there that makes a lot of sense. I think Graham hit it on the head when he said that about 49% of all local businesses do not have an online presence. The ones that do are doing actually better than the rest. So we're in a state of transition. As far as the raw data goes, I did make a suggestion that we send the raw data out to all elected officials, but after a discussion, it was decided that perhaps that would overload the task force, because you have people responding directly. So some of the mayors are more comfortable with it going through the mayors, through their councils, and the chairs to their board. It was also made very plain that we need to solicit the brain trust that we have with our staff, with the respective staff, because we have to get them on board this as well. So I think that we're still in the first steps on this. I'm very heartened to read some of the comments, and I can see there's a lot of things there that we could change and make better. I don't think we're gonna move heaven and earth here, but we can certainly do what we can as far as the regulatory and permitting stages go in our respective local government powers to make things better. And again, advocate senior government to change some of their policies, because some of it, if you read some of the comments from the food and beverage industry, it goes to show that if you walk a mile in their shoes, it's not easy. We don't make it easy for them, and especially with the province coming down heavy on some of the distilleries and wineries. When you've got WCB officers trying to bring forward Bonnie Henry's message about being kind, it may not work so well. But I would ask the board to grant us a little time on this. Some people think we move too fast. I don't. I think we're just about right on this, and we'll be getting more information in, and hopefully be able to share it with the local elected officials. And as I say, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to separate the hubris from the actual doables. And I think that's where we're going to go on this. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that came up last week as well, and the week before, and it was actually trying to articulate with the. I tried to put your hand down, Edwin, but I don't have the power to do that. Sorry, sorry. But when we're trying to articulate, like, what's the value that the base is going to get out of being part of this task force, or KFN, or Cumberland, or anybody really, to make sure that everyone, whether you're an elected official, or we're talking about the facilitators volunteering their time, or just people that are generally part of the TAC. And interestingly, the base made the comment that they see themselves as an observer. And then, my question was, what's your biggest issue right now? And they said, honestly, it's daycare. And, and as soon as that was said, like, everybody's eyes opened wide, because like right now, that's kind of a big issue for everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're the base or you're Comox First Nation or you're one of the municipalities, especially as we go back into the school year, however that may look, even just in the summertime here, what programs are running are at a reduced capacity, daycares at a reduced capacity, if it's running at all. And so that's having a fairly devastating impact just on the workforce of who can work, not because they're sick or not, but because of having to look after children. And so, that'd probably be, if I look at something that could be worked on. And so when talking with our ministers at the provincial level, that's the message that I'm really trying to push right now, is making sure that they're doing everything they can. And that's taken into account that there's already, I think, alignment. They've already been opening up spaces in the Comox Valley for daycare, but to really ramp that side of it up as we move forward. So thanks, Director Grieve.
Next, we have Director Brand.
Oh, thank you. Well, what did I unplug myself there? Something unplugged. Oh, well. Well, it must be a cold day in August, and it is, because I actually agree with Director Hamir for once, in that, at the task force, I've mentioned that I think we need to actually know who's in charge and who could actually pull the trigger on some of these things when the time comes. And it's early yet, but I think we really have to put our mind to how this is going to play out in the end, because there will be some tough decisions to make. There is going to be some areas where some are going to agree and disagree, and somebody has to be able to make the call and say, here's what we're doing. And I don't see that currently in the format that we've got. So I think it's something that this board and the task force really have to put their minds to. There's lots of different ways to skin this cat, and nobody knows what the right one is. So, to me, that's a really important piece, and it's one to get onto. And also, I agree with Director Greaves in that I think the elected officials need to get their hands on those letters. And I forget how we decided to do that. I think we're going to send them through the mayors, and the mayors were going to send them on. But I think it's important that we do that and we get on with it pretty soon. Like, I know we don't meet till September. That's getting really long in the day. And, I just took a drive down 5th Street. There's 8 businesses closed on 5th Street. And, if you'd said that 5 years ago, you'd have thought that the world was ending. We have 3 on Comox Avenue alone. We're starting to see the fallout, and there isn't a lot of time to sit and wait for us to have another meeting before we can have a look at these things and see where we want to go. So I think there's a little more urgency to this than maybe what people think. And I think that knowing how that's going to play out is an important piece, and something at least this board and the task force need to really start thinking about.
I'm not sure if I heard a question in there, but I'll respond just on a couple of things. And again, if it comes to speed, I think I was talking to Director Arbor back in March about this task force. So I certainly am happy to see that it's moving forward. But I don't know that we've been able to do a whole lot, even if we had started earlier, because we just didn't have a lot of information. But yeah, getting to who makes decisions, and then again, if we talk to Canadian Forces, we can make a decision that they just say that's great, but they're going to do their own thing. And Comox First Nation, again, for a variety of reasons, may be able to do things that we don't have the power to do, or vice versa. And then when we start looking at each of the municipalities, again, I think hopefully the information is articulate and it's able to make us make good decisions. And so, if that's the case, then we may be making the same decisions just based on the fact that they are sort of the right things to be making those decisions on. So, but I think you know, when that question of power is certainly one, if there's an ability to articulate it any clearer, that would be fine. But I think, again, if we're able to have those ECDEV folks from KFN and Cumberland be part of those meetings, I think there'd be some real value there, so that again, when we talk about that speed side of it, so that information can flow faster, because sometimes politicians can be known for talking a lot. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Mayor Wells. Yeah, and just my, addition to that is the discussion that we had at the task force, as you alluded to before, Mayor Wells, was, in relation to speed, that we felt that, if we divided the requests into the more policy and advocacy side and separate that from the direct financial contribution side, which we figured would take much longer and is more complicated, that we might achieve a quicker response if we divided those into those categories, so that we could respond to the policy requests faster. Was that your understanding of how it played out?
Absolutely, absolutely, and in fact, as I mentioned, I know there's one member that is more interested in that financial side, but I think when we took the vote, it really did come down to most people really trying to focus on the policy side, and unless something gets delegated to us through the CBRD, really to focus on those things. And again, I think that there's already a level of complexity, given that we are a committee that has different capacities in terms of being able to make decisions as members. And so that, when you add financial to that list, I think it just will complicate it more. And I think, I'm not complaining at all, but by doing that, it will probably really increase the length of our meetings. And I think that would be a challenge unto itself.
Yep, I hear you. So are there any further questions, comments? All right, so we will vote on receipt, so that we can then vote on whether we will consider the request tonight. So is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. And so I'll ask the board if they wish to amend the regular procedure of the delegation requests being considered at the following board meeting, and instead we'll consider it tonight. So this is just a vote on whether we amend procedure.
I was wondering if you wanted the motion. So moved. What you just said.
So Director Cole-Hamilton is going to move that, and seconded by Director Frisch. Oh, Director Grieve, do you have comments on the amendment to procedure?
Just that it would be appropriate to make it a notice of motion and bring it up under new business at the end of the meeting.
I'll just go to staff. Does it need to be brought up under notice of motion?
I think so. Do you want to consider it now?
They say that's okay to be considered now. So I will, Director Hamir, do you have a comment for? Okay. Okay, so I'll go through the roll. So this is for whether we amend our procedure tonight. So Director Grieve?
I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Arbor?
In favor.
Okay. Director Hamir? That's in favor. Okay. Director Frisch?
In favor.
In favor. Director Moore? In favor. Director Hillian?
In favor.
In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton?
In favor.
In favor. And Director Swift? In favor. And Director Grant? In favor. Okay, so that's unanimous. So we will consider the request for, I think it's 25. Oh,
Madam Chair, might I suggest that the appropriate motion would be to provide $2,500 in funding to assist the task force in their expenses?
Okay, that was moved by Director Cole Hamilton and seconded by Director Swift. Is there any discussion about, okay, Director Frisch? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question for staff. Where would that money come from, I suppose? Would that come from the Economic Development Service?
That's correct.
Okay. And would this be sort of the an edge of a wedge? And I don't know if this isn't really to staff, but will there be more expenses ongoing that are expected from the committee?
We're not aware of any, but you're in charge of the wedge. So the decision lies with the board. Yeah.
Fair enough. That's all. Thanks.
Director Hamir.
Thank you. I guess this is a question to staff, as I am one of the facilitators of one of the groups that could potentially be benefiting. Would it be good for me to either recuse myself or abstain from the vote? What would be best?
The motion as it is to help and assist with the expenses, not going to specific members or otherwise. The decision on the allocation of those funds will be made by the task force or CVEDs.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll go through the roll on the vote for the requested $2,500. Director Grieve.
Was that $27,000? I'm in favor, thank you.
Thank you. Director Arbor.
In favor, and thanks to Mayor Wells for coming.
Director Hamir. In favor. Director Frisch. In favor. Director Morin. In favor. Director Hillian. In favor. Director Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
In favor. Director Swift. In favor. And Director Grant. In favor. Okay, and that's unanimous. And I think that's it for this delegation. Thanks so much, Mayor Wells.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, we're on to reports. And the first report is the Sewage Commission minutes from July 28th. Thank you. Is anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to item 2, which is Director's Report from Director Arbor. Thank you. And do you wish to speak to the report, or do you just wish to put out for any questions that may arise out of it? Director Arbor.
Nope. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and are there any questions? And is there anyone opposed to receipt of Director Arbor's report? Okay, that's carried. And we're on to item 3, reallocation of function 451 funds to the Comox Valley Transition Society and Dawn to Dawn for the Cumberland Multifamily Affordable Housing Development. Thank you. And
yes, thank you very much, Chair and Directors. Alana Mullally is here, our Senior Manager of Sustainability and the Regional Growth Strategy, to explain the proposal of this report and answer any of your questions.
Great, thanks very much, Russell. Through the chair to the directors. This report recommends that you have another look at some of the funding that was allocated through the Homelessness and Support Service. This particular item is a request from the Comox Valley Transition Society to use money, $45,000, that was allocated through this year's strategic plan and budget for a supportive housing project for moms and babies, reallocate it to a multifamily affordable rental project that is soon, hopefully, to receive approvals in Cumberland. The CVTS is partnering with a number of organizations, including Dawn to Dawn, in order to make an application to BC Housing and CMHC to, I believe that application is coming up in September. And so the thinking is that this switch of funding will help bolster their application so that they can present a shovel-ready project to the other funders.
Thank you. And yeah, we did see this on the Cumberland Council agenda last night. There's 3 lots there that need to be rezoned. And so we supported moving forward with rezoning. Once the 3 lots are rezoned, then they will also need to be consolidated. So are there any questions, comments? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, this is a vote of areas A, B, C, Courtney and Cumberland. Oh, sorry. Yep, we're on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none. Again, this. Thank you. And you can see the recommendation on your screen. And again, it's the vote of areas A, B, C, and Courtney and Cumberland. So I'll go through the roll. Director Grieve.
In favor.
Director Arbor.
In favor.
Director Hamir. In favor. Director Frisch. In favor. Director Morin. In favor. Director Hillian. In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton. In favor. And I'm also in favor. So that's unanimous. Thank you. And we're on to item 4, proposed policy framework and board policy review. Thank you. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Jake Martins is here, our General Manager of Legislative Services, to talk about his most exciting concept, and that is policy framework, and to answer any of your questions, and I'm sure there will be many.
Thank you, CAO and Madam Chair. Yes, this is an exciting report, in my opinion, each page of it. And before you is an omnibus review, this can be described as, certainly. And but certainly want to emphasize that a review such as this nature is an important aspect of ensuring that our policies are not only up to date and are relevant, but it also helps to appropriately charge and empower staff with undertaking the business of the board. And so in this regard, board policies are a really important element of local government governance in concert with bylaws and resolutions that you pass from time to time. There is certainly a distinction, although not incredibly apparent, but there's a distinction between bylaws and policies. It's often a point of confusion for both the public and sometimes for staff and elected officials. And I would offer that bylaws are typically used to exercise the corporate and regulatory powers of the regional district, but policies are more commonly focused on guiding decision-making with respect to the services and powers that the board has. I can use the analogy here of a house. It's not perfect, but I'll offer it up nonetheless. You can think of the foundation of a house as sort of the letters patent that are provided to each local government. You can think of the walls and the roof as the bylaws that are passed, and maybe the fixtures and the paintings and that kind of thing as the policies that they're then adopted. All of this, again, is about that full scope of governance that's provided at the local level. As the board will note, much of the policy changes being proposed through this review relate to the rescinding of many redundant policies, some of them quite dated. Those are provided in Appendix C and attached to the report. While some of them date back to the 1970s, I'm pleased to advise that there are no major relics that some other communities have uncovered from similar processes. I will note that communities in the interior and the Lower Mainland have found restrictions on sports that frighten horses, on the sale of stoves on Wednesdays, and the use of streets by cows across their community. So I would say that there's none of that nature within this policy review, and if that helps alleviate any concerns, I'm pleased with that. In addition to the rescinding of redundant policies, changes are also proposed to amend certain policies that are out of date, as well as reclassifying some that we've deemed to be more administrative in nature. The other important aspect I would draw your attention to is the proposed policy framework. This is essentially a policy to guide our policies, and it provides a framework to ensure consistency, control, and clarity and quality of our policies. It also provides for a formal review schedule aligned with the election cycle, so that way when a new board is elected, part of the orientation process is to review then all of these policies, and certainly it would be an opportunity to highlight those that are most important as far as that orientation to local governance. It also provides greater public transparency. And so part of this would be, if adopted by the board, then staff would undertake uploading all of our board policies to our website for public viewing. Right now, we have a number of them provided for them there, but certainly it's not an exhaustive list. So in this respect, the framework, in my opinion, provides for a bit of an opportunity for us to reset on some of our key processes regarding our policy management, and certainly continue to uphold the board's role of respecting policy making. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Great. Anyone have questions? Director Hillian. Oh, sorry. I think Director Cole Hamilton was first. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I just wanted to say you had me at a policy to guide policies. Sounds gripping. It's just something small that I noticed just in the recommendations. And I think that under recommendation 2, Appendix B is to be rescinded, not amended. And under number 3, Appendix C is to be amended, not rescinded. I think the words just got reversed in the recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, just want to delete the wrong.
Yes, no. That
And
is
they're gone.
duly noted and much appreciated.
And I just wanted to, there was one part that I found took me quite a while to work through, and just to understand, and that was, I think it's parts 8 and 10, and one defines the policies that are board policies, and one's define the policies that are CAO policies. And I just wanted to make sure I understood the distinction. Sorry, I should have written the page number down with that. It's page 5. Thanks, Lisa. So as I understood it, and I kind of broke it up and like cut and pasted and broke it up, the distinction, the things that make in section 10 that make things a CAO policy are that they don't have financial or legal implications, that they don't guide the board's decision, and that they have an internal focus that relates to attitudes, behaviors, and philosophies and intentions. Are those, am I reading it right, that those are the 3 distinguishing qualities between the board?
That's absolutely how I would interpret that as well.
Okay. And I was just curious about the policies that are driven by or have an external focus. Just wondering if you just give me a sense of what falls within the term external focus.
Yeah, that's I think it's to the point of the focus on community and the services. So it's affecting people, their use of their property, services that they receive from the regional district, of that nature. That's certainly the focus of, I guess, that term, I would say.
Okay, thank you for clarifying all that. And I just say we are extremely fortunate to have someone on our staff who enjoys putting together a 267-page memo on outdated policies. So thank you so much for that work, Jake. You bet.
Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. And I must say that, Jake, this work is near and dear to my heart. I spent several years as a policy analyst and once spent an afternoon in Victoria with a lot of high-priced help having a discussion about the difference between a guideline and a standard. So, so thanks very much for all your work. I just wondered if there was some easy way that I missed of actually getting to each of the appendices without thumbing through the entire 260 odd pages.
Yeah, so we did struggle with how to make that most accessible, and certainly linking each one of them was one of the ideas that we had proposed. I think without scrolling through them, the appendix B, C, D, and E are provided in there, but I think, as you noted, it takes a bit of work to get through to each one. But
yeah, and there's no actual page numbers. They're pages of the individual policies. So, for example, you can't flip to page 247 to find appendix D if you want to look for that. So
yeah, and this was one where it may have just suffered from late on Friday trying to bring this all together in time for the agenda.
Yes, and I can appreciate that some fatigue may have set in, so no problem. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, in the light of that, we can offer that we come back to maybe in particular the ones that are to be rescinded. Some of the ones in section C, I believe it is. Is that, if that's something that's desired by the board, if they feel that they didn't have the time to go through that is an option. Director Frisch?
Just quickly wanted to thank staff for going through and changing all the small B's to big B's in the board. It's really, I appreciate that. It means something to me anyways. Thanks.
And if I may add, Madam Chair, part of the policy framework would be empowering staff to change those small B's to big B's on our own without having to come forward to the board and consuming. So this would be a good step forward.
Yeah, and I think the majority of it, as you stated, is housekeeping, and
yes, using
the analogy that you used of it being a house, it's more like just cleaning the gutters. But but yeah, if the board feels that we need more time, we can do that. Otherwise, if there's no further questions, we'll move on receipt. Is anyone opposed to receipt? Okay, hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there are if there's no one opposed to doing that, and no one wants to bring this to a future meeting. Just to clarify, between 2 and 3 to change. Yeah. Right. Okay, so so you've moved to that all 4 recommendations go forward with the amendment that was made by Director Cole Hamilton, just switching the wording for recommendation 2 and 3. Okay, I'll go through the roll. It's a vote of the full board. Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Arbour?
In favor.
Director Hamir? In favor. Director Frisch? In favor. Director Morin? In favor. Director Hillian? In favor. Director Cole Hamilton? In favor. Director Swift? In favor. And Director Grant? In favor. That's unanimous. That carried. So we are on to, thank you so much, Jake, for all your work. Yeah. We're on to item 5, permissive tax exemption for Sunnydale Golf Society. Thank you. And is there any questions or comments? Okay, anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and there's a recommendation. Okay, and you can see the recommendation on your screen. Any comments or questions? Okay, and this is a vote of the full board. So going through the roll, Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Arbour?
In favor.
Director Hamir? In favor. Director Frisch? In favor. Director Morin? In favor. Director Hillian? In favor. Director Cole Hamilton? In favor. Director Swift? In favor. Director Grant? In favor. And that's unanimous. Thank you. And we're on to item 6, permissive tax exemption for the Union Bay Historical Society. Thank you. Any comments or questions on receipt? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move the recommendation. Second.
Thank you. Moved by Director Hillian, seconded by Director Frisch. Any further comments, questions? Okay, and it's a vote of the full board. Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Arbour?
In favor.
Director Hamir? In favor. Director Frisch? In favor. Director Morin? In favor. Director Hillian? In favor. Director Cole Hamilton? In favor. Director Swift? In favor. Director Grant? In favor, and that's unanimous. Thank you. And item 7, Comox Valley United Soccer Club Fieldhouse funding request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Doug DeMarzo, General Manager of Community Services, is here to provide a brief summary of the report and answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you. Through the chair to the directors. This is follow up from a May 12th meeting where the CVUSC was here requesting funding of 150,000 towards a field house. If we just go to the next slide there, Lisa. As a reminder, the CVUSC, which is the Comox Valley United Soccer Club, is a nonprofit volunteer organization that has been in existence for about 20 years, oversees local youth, women, men's teams, and masters teams. A wide range of participants in both a recreational and a competitive league, ranging in ages from 5 to 18 at the youth side and up to the masters ages groups and beyond. So at that meeting, a motion was carried that staff be directed to prepare a staff report on the viability and options for supporting a request from the Comox Valley United Soccer Club for a contribution of up to 150,000 to build a storage change room washroom facility at the Vanier turf field. As we move on to the next slide, some of the highlights include from the COVID-19 response and renewal framework for the CVRD services. One of them is maintaining core services at an affordable cost. This does take into account careful management of recreation services by providing affordable and reliable services to the citizens in the CVRD. It also looks at adapting and changing community priorities. Part of this conversation around that is adaptation and look at how the impact of outdoor recreation is a more prominent source of recreation in light of COVID-19. Also realigning resources to support community renewal initiatives. This is an example of supporting a community initiative, although maybe not such a renewal phase as it's a new project. The Sports Commission also has a number of strategic goals supported here, including partnership outcomes and building on relationships to enhance communities. Really, the social fabric of communities and the health and well-being of citizens depend on solid and sustainable community partnerships, which this is one of, and collaboration and support are ever present in guiding our service delivery here. As we move to the next slide, it speaks a little bit about the Recreation Grant Service, where the recommended funding is coming from. As you may recall, the CVRD allocates recreation grant funds to local governments and nonprofit organizations in the Comox Valley through a service established by bylaw. A large portion of the service was established specifically to support the Courtney Outdoor Memorial Pool, and it will continue to do so. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic on June 16th, the city of Courtney announced the Outdoor Memorial Pool would remain closed, thereby resulting in some extra funding from this year. Along with a few other items outlined on the graph on the TV there, it looks like there's about $115,000 in unspent funds from that grant process. So at this point, one of the options presented to you are to look at allocating that $115,000 from the Rec Grant Service to support the soccer club's initiative, or look at additional options that were presented in the report. All the options, if you choose to be supportive of this ask, will outline a few conditions as well that the soccer club would have to meet in order to receive the grant funding. Lastly, I'll just leave it open to any questions on the report. I'm happy to go into any further detail if required.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
Thank you, and thanks to staff for the presentation. You know, I do really like supporting projects like this because of all of the wonderful in-kind work that a local group like this is providing, as well as funding. So I think it makes great sense to partner with groups like that that bring so much to the table. My only worry is the shortfall of the $35,000 odd from their original ask. And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to ask them, the soccer club, if they've been able to identify other sources. I know we talked about potentially speaking to some of the Rotary and other service groups. Do you know if that was done?
Yes, we had lengthy discussions on that. Part of the rationale for the report coming back in August was to give them time for those discussions. Unfortunately, I would suggest at this time those discussions are taking longer than anticipated, but they still have a couple options available to them, what they are speaking with the local service clubs. Also noting that those clubs also have a lot of different demands and fundraising opportunities that may not have existed this year as have existed in the past. So they have some limitations as well. But we continue to encourage them to speak to the local service clubs.
So would we be providing this funding subject to them filling the shortfall, or would it just be a full-on grant and then wait until they can get the other?
I think we'd be providing this funding subject to them constructing a field house that operates within the budget that they have, and provides some of the amenities that they've outlined to us. So whether that means looking at a different design or looking at if they find other grant funding and continue to even build a better building, that's fine too. But I think it's really meeting the needs of the community and the construction project. And I think it's largely up to them to define their end costs and how they're going to meet that.
Director Hillian, you need to, thanks. Oops.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the report, which I found very positive and affirming. I wanted to advise the board that I did have a call from a member of the executive of the Soccer Association, because I'd made the suggestion when the presentation was made that they approach Rotary, and I was contacted to find out how, in fact, or who they should talk to by Phil Statham of this soccer club. I put him in touch with Dave Snyder, the Recreation and Cultural Director, and Courtney, who have been working with Rotary on a number of projects. I don't know what the results of that are, but I'm optimistic. I'm also optimistic about the resourcefulness of this organization, and I certainly support us reallocating these funds, which were already budgeted and haven't been spent, to benefit the infrastructure for what remains not only the most popular and widely participated in sport for people of all ages in the Comox Valley, but one of the most economically accessible sports that is available out there. So thanks again to staff for a very positive report.
Director Grant.
Thanks. So Doug, I'm just reading this and I got a call from the field lacrosse people wanting to know about using the field when soccer wasn't using it. So I noticed in here you've got a subject to use agreement for secondary users. Does that include the field as well as the building?
The field would have to go through the booking. The field would have to go through the booking process available to them. So this is specific to the clubhouse. I'm assuming that I know the field hockey uses that. I'm not aware whether field lacrosse has approached the booking agent to do that. I think the booking's largely done through the city of Courtney for that field. Yeah.
I have two children who both play soccer, and that's how I know that the facility that we have there now, the washroom facility, is often not available. And I think that's due to the management of it by the school district. So it's often not open in evenings and on weekends. So my concern is, how will this new facility be managed? And especially in light of COVID and the probably rather intense cleaning that will need to happen, and with the different user groups as well. How will we manage that facility?
Much of the details need to be worked out in the agreement, but primarily the objective is for the two change rooms and areas to be managed through that agreement for other teams through a key system. And then they've also added an accessible washroom on the side, and it's envisioned to be opened a lot more hours than the current washroom is. With COVID in play now and cleaning regimes, we'll have to revisit that with the school district and what that looks like in the COVID era. But I think post that era, it is envisioned that that washroom is more available to the public for more hours of the term.
Yeah, I think, considering the difficulty that we have with access to the current building, that I would want to see more of a concrete outline of how that building will be cleaned and managed before I approved this funding. Any further comments, questions? Okay, we're on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and there is a recommendation. That's moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Cole-Hamilton. And it's a vote of the full board. So going through the roll, Director Grieve.
In favor.
Director Arbor. Director Arbor.
In favor? In favor, sorry.
Thank you. Director Hamir. In favor. Director Frisch. In favor. Director Morin. In favor. Director Hillian. In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton. In favor. Director Swift. In favor. Director Grant. In favor. And I'm opposed. And that's carried. Thank you. On to item 8, CVRD grant funding services process recommendations. Thank you. I'll pass that to staff.
Thank you, Chair and Directors, and Doug DeMarzo will also provide a summary of this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Through the chair to directors. The main purpose of this report is to confirm the guidelines and present the framework and new processes for creating criteria for various grant and funding services offered and administered through the CVRD. The main focus of the board here will largely focus on the REC grants. I won't go into all the details of the other ones, as many of them were covered in the EASC. But it's to acknowledge that the CVRD administers several services through which community-based organizations and local governments can receive grant funding. Staff are looking to standardize this process and establish criteria for each grant and funding service. This will help provide clarity to the public and to the funding recipients and improve the CVRD administration of the various grants, funds, and services. So as we move to the next slide, it'll focus a little bit on some of your strategic drivers, which, thinking of fiscal responsibility, this new process creates a higher level of transparency and accountability. When we think about climate crisis and environmental stewardship, the transparency of the grant and aid process allows for broader community grant funding, but also a new portal is looking for the future offset carbon grant opportunities as a positive step moving forward. Community partnerships, the grant process transparency allows new partners to apply for grants in addition to securing long-term agreements for traditional partners, which provides more stable and predictable financial support. It will enable these organizations to better continue their work in supporting the community. And lastly, with Indigenous relations, criteria could be considered for many of the grant opportunities may encourage working relationships built with Indigenous people. So as we look at the chart on the next slide, as you will note, I'll just maybe draw your attention to the recreational grants. Basically, it's looking at a 2-phase process. So it's looking at developing 5-year operational agreements for our traditional recipients, and then providing a stream through the CVRD portal, which allows applicants to propose or submit for significant events or special capital projects, and goes through a criteria assessment and an application process finally for board approval. The other two are mostly resulting for the arts and culture, and the grant and aid is mostly ASC focused. But it should also be noted that opportunities for others, such as Comox Valley Search and Rescue or other services that tend to receive money on a regular basis for us, would also be considered for 5-year agreements where feasible. And from an operational perspective, staff will develop the suitable timelines, the criteria to direct organizations to the appropriate funding streams so to avoid any confusion. Continue to recommend budgets for multi-year agreements on an outlining basic expectations with the board approval. And approval of grant support would be completed in a public meeting, such as the board meetings during the budget process, unless exceptions are required to that process. Just to remind you where we are in the process as we move to slide 5, we'll look at where we were. We're looking into the background research, which really took from May to in August 2019 when the original board motion to review the program came forward. We looked at many CBRD granting programs and other granting programs around. And what we found was we had a good granting program in place, and we didn't need to completely refocus the wheel or make major substantial changes to it. But we did need to make some tweaks around some of the things that I mentioned earlier in the process. And then moving out, we did have some outreach. A lot of this was to the electoral areas type groups and knowledge and culture groups that are funded and some other interested parties. And lastly, we're looking at moving to the grant development, which reviews the guidelines internally and then looks at financial considerations and a renewal process, looks at any bylaw drafts or electoral consent processes that may need to happen. And as this proceeds, we are hoping to start launching some of the programs in late 2021 and definitely by 2022, getting that community portal up and running once everything's complete. So some of it is reliant on the ASC processes and then moving forward to that communications perspective to reach out to the public, hopefully by the 2022 budget cycle in reality at this stage. The report obviously outlines more details, and I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Doug, again. We spent a pretty considerable time discussing this at electoral areas yesterday, so I won't get into the details, but one question that I forgot to ask was around our timelines for the granting. This year we were able to speed up some of the disbursement of the funds because of COVID. And I know that was much appreciated by the community. Can you foresee us being able to tighten up our timing of when, the applications go in to when the money is dispersed? Because usually, if I recall, it's late spring and then we don't give out money until September.
Yeah, so some of the rationale for it's usually early August, I think we dispersed, but it's partly because that's when we receive our funding at the CBRD. So there's a gap there from a financial perspective. Kevin's not in the room, but I can't explain it. But Russell's nodding his head yes. So basically we have to wait for our money. So we rely on other funding sources prior to receiving those from the BC tax surveyor. Is that correct, Russell? Do you have anything else you want to add to that one?
Yes, that has been the rationale in the past, but certainly we can look at maybe prioritizing or finding out what those grant applicants that can wait and those that have more urgent. Maybe there's a two-step process. But it's something we'll seek guidance from our CFO on.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions, comments? I know that we went through the same process a couple of years ago with the Village of Cumberland and splitting the grants streams into the long-term and the one-time actually helped both council and staff a lot in processing. And I think it actually goes a long way to help develop those community partnerships, which is one of our strategic drivers. So I'm very happy to see this come forward. So we are still on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Oh, I see Director Grieve has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I think it's important to realize that many of these groups are very poorly organized and some of their accounting practices are not the best. So we are dealing, of course, with volunteers, very dedicated volunteers in electoral areas anyway. And we have to cut a little slack on some of these things. I know that the intent here is well taken, but I would caution that we have to going forward. We have to maybe tweak it a little bit as it goes forward. And as I said yesterday, I think the devil's in the details here. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Any further comments, questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation 1. And that is that the recreation program be provided through 5-year funding agreements while also retaining a stream for one-time special initiatives and events. And this is a vote of the full board. So I'll start with Director Grave.
In favor.
Director Arbour.
In favor.
Director Hamir. In favor. Director Frisch. In favor. Director Morin. In favor. Director Hillian. In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton. In favor. Director Swift. In favor. Director Grant. In favor. And so that's unanimous. Thank you. And there's recommendation 2. Thank you. And that is on your screen about providing agreements to the search and rescue and victim services. And it's a vote of the full board again. So I'll go through the roll. Director Grave.
In favor.
Director Arbour.
Yes.
Director Hamir. In favor. Director Frisch. In favor. Director Morin. In favor. Director Hillian. In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton. In favor. Director Swift. In favor. Director Grant. In favor. That's unanimous. Thank you. Sure, we could have a 5-minute recess and we'll come back and move on to item 9. spots.
We're almost there anyway.
So we left off at item 9, which is the COVID-19 update on fracture on 5th functional earthquake exercise. Thank you. And I'll pass it to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And this is one of those rare moments in time where you have the power to determine the timing of a natural disaster. And Howie will explain to you what is proposed with a fracture on the 5th and answer any of your questions.
Great. Thank you very much to the chair and directors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. Enjoy your meal, and I'll just try to make this quick as possible because I've got 2 presentations in front of you tonight. So so I'm in front of you today to provide a report on an update on the exercise that we've been planning since the start of 2019, working with contractor Callian, who has been the contractor to lead us in the design of this exercise. As COVID hit and we got closer into deciding on what we need to be doing for the future, the exercise really takes part with a lot of stakeholders from our emergency response and emergency planning committee groups. And I did a reach out to them to feel if they thought it was adequate to be able to continue the exercise, modify the exercise, or look at trying to, what would be comfortable making them feel safe and feeling that we could still try to achieve the exercise. The outcome of that was very clear that they would want to postpone the exercise. That also was a feeling I got a sense of from our executive management team and design team, was just kind of looking at, if we can't modify it, what can we do? So in front of you today is a request, recommended asking for postponing the exercise until 2021. I've worked with Callian. They are in agreement of that. They will extend their contract, which is still in the process of being sent to us, but they have given us in a written format that is their intent. They really want to be able to provide this exercise at the level that we were hoping for. And so they do support and will continue to support what our outcome of that is. So I'm just looking for your support and recommendation to postpone this. And again, it will be variable based on what COVID-19 does and our abilities to obviously run an emergency operations center and try to continue on addressing the event itself that's happening. And I'll take any questions.
And Madam Chair, if I could just qualify, the vote on this matter is in electoral area 1, because the service is in electoral area 1. We do provide the service to the municipalities, but it's on a contract basis. You're not participants of the service, but it does affect you and your staff. They would be participating in this, but I just want to explain the rationale behind who votes on this.
Thank you for that. Director Morin.
Great, thanks, Chair. I just had a question about if and when we have another wave of COVID, or if the future proposed date, isn't possible again. Is there anything that can be done in the meantime in terms of adapting it in those circumstances, or is it just wait and see what happens?
Yeah, yes, Director Morin, yes, we've tried to look at some modifications to that. What we did feel that has been a benefit of the COVID event happening is a lot of there was a lot of lessons learned through the process right now of going to a virtual EOC component, working with an unknown event that really impacted the region as a whole and all local governments in the same way. And so that was what a lot of the component of the earthquake was actually going to do, was really bring us in as a regional group to work together to run Emergency Operations Center and do a lot of the field work. So we're achieving a lot of that through this process. trying to modify it further was a very bit of a struggle because it really would trying to bring in, the goal of this is really trying to engage our volunteer support and response groups and trying to ensure or to provide a safe environment to do that. We didn't think it was the right appropriate direction to go.
Just push your mic, please.
Just a quick follow-up. I guess I'm thinking, you know, it's a neat, interesting opportunity to, whether it's involved in the exercise or just in your own planning, to look at a natural disaster during COVID and the different, you know, the different things that you would have to do in that circumstance. So just an added challenge to think about.
And I support that. We actually are doing that right now. Part of the job is we're advanced planning. We usually are into a fire season right now. We actually had an uncommon event happen with us with the electrical storm that went through and hit 95 strikes on Vancouver Island, which is not a normal process for us. So we're all anxiously waiting to see how that would develop. And I know Nanaimo, the city of Nanaimo has had their EOC a bit further to watch that fire that had happened there. So we are already doing that kind of planning for something that could happen with those kinds of events. As we look always forward, we're looking at September and October when possibly the second wave or the curve will turn more drastically. We were also looking to severe weather patterns that could happen too. With all that forecasting as part of my job and my deputy's job and other emergency planners is what is the capacity of our first responders and our support responders who are going to be doing the main part of the work in the field, and trying to give them the time to just adjust to what they have to do with this new renewal and restart program. So.
Thank you. Next we have Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Howie. As always, we certainly appreciate the work you put in, but you know, Mother Nature, frankly, doesn't care if we have a COVID issue going on or not. And I have to support the previous speaker that we could have multiple events going on at the same time. If not now, then when are we going to do this? I know Mike Farnier brought this forward like 10 years ago about bringing an earthquake preparedness exercise. And at the time, it was it didn't go forward. And I thought, well, of all these exercises, wildfires and what have you, you know, the big one is the big one. The big one will be the shaker. So I'm not going to vote against the recommendation. Obviously, you have enough on your plate, but I don't think that, you know, having COVID precludes an earthquake in any way, shape, or form. And we could end up with compounding events at the same time. I think it better now than later. I don't think there is a later. We have no crystal ball here. We don't know what's going to be happening as far as the pandemic goes in 4, 6, 8 months time. So if we put this off, that's fine. But we're playing roulette here. We're throwing the dice. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hillian's next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming that there's a ton of work involved in organizing an event like this.
We've been planning since January of 2019, and we're only halfway through when we had to pull the plug. The part of the planning component, it really takes a lot of the work from our first responders. So RCMP engagement, BC Ambulance Services, our search and rescue teams, our emergency support services. These are the stakeholders that I require and need to be able to do and put on an event like this. And I cannot do that without them. And they're giving me a clear answer that they've got enough on their plate just trying to respond or be ready to respond in the COVID environment. I understand. I can appreciate this is an event that you know, we can't forecast it and we need to plan for it. but if it happens tomorrow, it happens tomorrow, and we'll do it just like we did with COVID. But right now, I need to respect the words I'm hearing from a lot of those first responders. And
no, I totally get that, and I wholeheartedly endorse your proposal. I actually have a suggestion. I think that when we do have this event, we should combine it, because I think all the first responders involved will be ready to party once it's finished. And I think the Fracture on 5th is a wonderful name for a dance that could be held in conjunction with this event. And you could feature music like All Shook Up and a whole lot of shaking going on. And, maybe we could even raise some money and get Edwin Grieve to provide some of his pals to play the music. So Fracture on 5th, I think it really works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, it's kind of like if your household was all ill and you said, okay, now it's time for a fire drill, you don't really need to add to people's stress. So I agree with the recommendation. Any further comments or questions? Okay, we're on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And thank you. And that is to postpone the Fracture on 5th exercise. Any further comments, questions? Okay, and this is just a vote of area ABC. So Director Grieve.
I said I'd vote in favor reluctantly.
Thank you. Director Arbor. Oh, I think we lost Director Arbor. So should we postpone this vote until he's back on? Oh, okay. Okay, we'll just have to make note that he is absent. Okay, Director Hamir. Thank you. That's carried. And we are on to item 10. And item 10 is the COVID-19 emergency programs function, core service delivery.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Directors, and Howie Siemens will again present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you again, Chair, to the directors. As part of the Comox Valley Regional District core services, we looked at the restart, the renewal and restart processes for the emergency service component, which has been identified in the strategic planning as a core service. And we deliver a rural service under our Function 271. We also provide a service contract agreement to all the local governments within in the Comox Valley, which is the City of Courtenay, Town of Comox, and the Village of Cumberland. We also provide a more regional service, that includes them, but also that includes business continuity for the regional rural services that we provide. So like water and solid waste and stuff like that. These are all conducted and we follow through both the legislative requirements and lessons learned from events. The legislative requirements are the Emergency Program Act, which we're all well aware is being reviewed right now and possibly changing through EMBC. So we are waiting for some of that to happen. Lessons learned, obviously, we are doing a debriefing right now of the COVID-19 phase 1 debrief of the EOC and operations. So a lot of you participated in that, and we appreciate that. That information will then look at adjusting what we're going to be doing in the future with a lot of our different plans and procedures and guidelines. And then the 5 principles of the CVDR's response renewal reports, which is maintaining the core services at an affordable cost, sustaining sustainable, stable services in support of the local economy, adapting to changing community priorities, realigning resources to support community renewal initiatives, and communicating clearly about those actions. As you know, the COVID-19 has resulted in significant challenges to many of our CVR necessary and essential services. This includes the emergency service. Some of these of the emergency program have been established and adapting the EOC to a fully virtual operation, ensuring the operational capacity of the emergency support services who do help support evacuees and continue doing that service even for those small house fires that we've had as during COVID, canceling face-to-face training and meetings and adapting to online style of training through Zoom or other means. Some of the adaptation has provided new opportunities to rethink long-term planning for our service, as it is outlined in our table 1 in the report. The emergency programs will continue to be important core service in the community, Comox Valley, in the renewal phase by focusing on continued readiness for any emergency or disaster while initiating conservative, flexible approaches to responding during the COVID-19 event, ensuring the safety of emergency response personnel, staff, and volunteers through continuous monitoring of the COVID public health and work safe procedures, guidelines, and regulations, assessing opportunities that could allow for the full return of services or projects, deferring some operational and capital expenditures to the 2021 budgeting cycle, and also reevaluating traditional operating models and structures with a focus on using lessons learned for potential service improvements. This is a report just for information for you to decide on. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Director Hamir has a question.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Howie, for your presentation and the report. I just want to say thank you to you and your team for all that you've done since March and since this rolled out. I know you had to really pivot quickly in something that was unprecedented, and you did a fantastic job. So thanks to everybody on the team for figuring out something that no one had really figured out before. So I think it just really points to the resiliency of the team and your ability to adapt really quickly. I'm looking at the budget and seeing that you're looking at ways of saving dollars. I think this is one of the few services where I would say potentially even it's time we spend some more, because if one thing that was made clear in this first wave of COVID was the vulnerabilities that we have in the community with our homelessness population, with our seniors population. And I know what stuck for me was, and it's been something that I've known, that in a big emergency, be prepared to be on your own. Like the best way for our community to ride through at a big emergency is to shelter in place and to have your systems in place that if you can't get food, someone in your direct bubble or your neighbor that can do the food runs, the water runs, like everything that you can't do. And I'm a bit concerned that, we kind of fuddled our way through, like as a community, not you, figuring out who that was but I think it would be so much better if we had better structures in the different neighborhoods, especially in the rural areas. You think people in the rural areas know each other, but we don't. In some neighborhoods, neighbors don't really talk to each other, or let alone sit down and figure out who has what assets in the community. Like if the power goes out, who's got the generators? And I'm wondering if that's something that staff could put their mind to. Maybe not doing in-person training, but some kind of Zoom training for how we get through one of these big emergencies. Doing it, I was kind of thinking, well, maybe we could go back to doing in person, but why? I mean, it's such a logistical nightmare right now, trying to find a venue, safe spacing and all of that. And if you did a few of these on Zoom, people from different communities who I would say kind of are the key people that can then organize within their own community could be provided with a checklist. So I don't know if that's something that you already have, in a toolkit of training, neighborhoods to kind of shelter in place and figure that if that is something that is transferable onto Zoom. and that you could provide more of? Because I think if we strike now, while it's still pretty raw in people's memory that, oh yeah, we were really stuck here, and for a few days we didn't know how we would do our shopping and blah, blah, blah. I think your response, the uptake would probably be better. So just wanted to point that out, that if anything, if we have funds available, I would like to keep them in this service and spend more on reaching out so that our community is better prepared. Thanks.
So thank you for that, Director Maher. I just want to give you a little knowledge we're trying to work on too. I actually have a project on the go with the base. They've reached out to me and they're wanting to do a video process for their new recruits that come in and station here. And so we're trying to do that in September. We're going to actually do a Zoom YouTube feed and then have that recorded so that we can actually share it with other members. So those are great ideas, and we're trying to move us into the new world instead of doing that face to face, because everybody who had a neighborhood program set up for during the summer has canceled those opportunities. So usually they're barbecues or backyard kind of events, and they all got canceled. So yeah.
I see Director Grieve has hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Howie, again. I have to totally agree with my learned colleague from Area B that of all these services we're trying to save pennies on here, this is the last one we should be cutting. While we're giving, $100,000+ to a certain sporting group, which may or may not be able to even play during the oncoming second wave, if that happens, of the pandemic. We're saving pennies by pulling back on the one function that is going to save us in case we have multiple emergencies, which I brought forward in the last agenda item. We have to prioritize here, and certainly emergency preparedness is the #1 issue for this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And I would also like to echo Director Hamir's initial sentiments about the great work that you and your team have done over the last few months, and how appreciative this board is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
And we're on to bylaws and resolutions for first, second, and third reading. And the first one is the Comox Valley Regional District Property Tax Exemption Bylaw 620. That was moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Cole Hamilton. Any discussion? This is for first, second, third. Yeah. Oh, just first and second. Sorry. Okay, and it's a vote of the full board. So starting with Director Grieve.
Favor.
And do we have Director Arbor back yet? No, we don't. Okay, Director Hamir. In favor? Director Fish? In favor? Director Morin? In favor? Director Hillian? In favor? Director Cole Hamilton? In favor? Director Swift? In favor? And Director Grant? In favor. So that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. This for third reading. Director Grieve?
Favor.
Director Hamir? In favor? Director Fish? In favor? Director Morin? In favor? Director Hillian? In favor? Director Cole Hamilton? In favor? Director Swift? In favor? And Director Grant? In favor. That's unanimous. Thank you. And we're on to recommendation for the property tax exemption bylaw 621 for Union Bay Historical Society. Yes, for first and second reading, moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Cole Hamilton. And it's a vote of the full board. Director Grieve?
Favor.
Director Hamir? In favor. Director Frisch? In favor. Director Moran? In favor. Director Hillian? In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton? In favor. Director Swift? In favor. Director Grant? In favor. Thank you. And we're on to third reading. Thank you. Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Hamir? In favor. Director Frisch? In favor. Director Moran? In favor. Director Hillian? In favor. Director Cole-Hamilton? In favor. Director Swift? In favor. Director Grant? In favor. That's unanimous. Okay, great. And we're through the bylaws. So we will move into in camera. Thank you.